Thank you so much, Nathan. And I'm really excited to be here and with so many good friends in the audience. Really feels like coming home, running around. Let me, I'm not sure how this is going to go. Let's just see where we go with this. Well, I'm going to start by telling you like the cliff notes. I'm going to front load this and tell you everything you need to know about me. And if you need to leave early after this page, you'll know it. So, yes, I have been at IBM so far 33 years, so my first half of my career, I guess. I expected to stay there about 3 years when I hired in. But I am an IBM Fellow, which means I'm old and weird. And I have, there are about 70 or so, some odd, well, they're all odd of us. And the one thing I would say is that my, as Nathan pointed out, I have been working in the area of chip design for about 33 years. But if you're here to hear about subgraph isomorphism or minimum perturbation compaction, sorry, not going to talk about it at all. I didn't know who was going to be in the audience. I've been very much active in my industry. I love my industry. I've been active in the professional societies. But that's only one aspect. The other two aspects you have to know is that I am a total nerd. Any other nerds? Nerdettes? Weirdos? Whack jobs? Okay, good. Okay, so that's number two. And number three, well, I would add 3.5, is I'm a dad. And I'm very pleased that my oldest son, Max, who was 6 weeks old when I started at CMU, and you are now 7 or 8 weeks, something like that. Yeah. The facial hair. So the combination of being, a profession, a nerd, and a kid would have been enough, but I have to also very much thank my lovely wife, actually my only wife for that matter, Diane Mariano, a physicist by training, but my soulmate and the person who actually wrote this talk. So the combination of having the right wife and being a nerd and kid has a lot to do with the topic today about play. And that has led me to do some really strange things. As a matter of fact, I will tell you that this is the second stupidest thing I've ever done. And so I'll just give that as a prelude here. Ooh, do we have audio?
As I walk through my business, I know I owe it a debt. It created my profession and my career's a sure bet. Engineering's my trade and I love my degree. It was that, not my looks, that got my spot on TV. I grew up thinking like my science and math, and you will too if you want to follow my path, school. Now you may be thinking you more gangster than me, but you motherboarders never see my PC. If you be a gamer, you can't give me no.
Just in the interest of staying out of IP jail, I'm going to take that off for a while, and actually I'm going to change clothes maybe. So I have been very passionate. Okay, it's really bad. But I want you to keep in mind, wait, I have to take do I have to take this off before I get to the MIT picture? Shouldn't bring that up here, no. This is part of my passion, and my company has been very, sorry. Oh, right, that's what I really meant. Okay, so, no, I want to say, no, but this is very important. I'm going to talk a lot about sharing our passions and whatever our passions, your passions are with next generation, with our peers, etc. But before I do, I really am very, very grateful, and I want to just say that to one serious moment, if I may, that I'm so grateful to CMU for welcoming us here and for giving me this award. I guess it's us because Diane helped make the paper. But this was a really important part. This was one of the most remarkable things that we ever did in our life. As I mentioned, our son Max was 6 weeks old when we came here. We were lucky enough, and I wanted to give a big debt of gratitude also to my employer, IBM, who has funded my graduate work here and has been supportive in putting up with me for 33 years, so I would like to thank them. I'd also like to thank particularly a couple of people here at the university. My advisors and the faculty, the most amazing people. These folks have had an incredible effect on my professional and personal and career life. And does this thing have a laser? Here. I just want to particularly shout out to my advisor, Rob Rutenbar, who told me about the importance of communication and to the last moment was correcting my font choices here. Rick Carley, Ron Rohr, look at that smile, and a variety of other people, Wojtek Mali, Andre Storyvas, and particularly, they weren't my professors, they were my peers or my friends since, Sean Blanton, Larry Pileggi, and his wife, Leah, over there, and Liz Knight, who is here, who kept me out of trouble, and I just want to say how wonderful that was. Now, I'd like to say that these people had such a great draw that when we were looking, when our young family we were looking about where we would go to graduate school, I was lucky because IBM had been so supportive. They had given me sort of the proverbial blank check. Go get in any place you can, we'll pay for it, which was a great, fantastic deal. And I had some good choices: Stanford, Berkeley, MIT. But CMU just really called to us, and I'd like to say it was because of these professors and what their draw was, but just in the spirit of play. Actually, the real reason we ended up here. Does anyone know the I Ching? So it's a Chinese game, a divination game for telling the future, and literally we were trying to figure out where would we go. We knew no one in Pittsburgh at all, and you take these little sticks and you throw them out, and you get what's called a hexagram. It's a combination of characters, and you read it. And we just, on a whim, because we had 3 choices, they all looked good. But what it basically said was Pi Ka'an Ka'un, which means where the dismal waters flow together. Cambridge only has 1 river, Berkeley's got the water, but 3 dismal rivers, that's what it was. But really, CMU has been a fantastic place, and I really appreciate it. It has taught me very well, and it gave me a trade. I was able to find these. Oh, wait, Dave Garrett is in the room. I should give a shout out to him as well. Dave, do you recognize these? This is what we worked on. We were working on device level placement for analog place and route, which then went on to become a company where my friend Shiloh is now working. So this really was a perfect setup for a really good career. But it wasn't just the technical stuff, it was the connections with these folks up here. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my career. So that's the only serious stuff I'm going to say. Is that all right? Okay. So when I talk about my tenure at IBM, this is a long, I really could use it. Does somebody have a laser? I'm just point. A couple of years ago, my company turned 100, which doesn't happen very often. And we started doing a lot of retrospect on what our industry had been through. And it's really remarkable. My period in the company kind of starts here I guess my part in the industry starts back here in the 70s, started at IBM in 81. I was at CMU from 88 to 91, and I'm still going who knows how long. What was really interesting about this telling, this is actually data that was gathered by Kurzweil and Hans Moravec, who was a CMU professor. And what this is it's looking at how much computing you could buy for $1,000 adjusted for currency. So if you actually go back and you kind of look back even into the 1900s, my company started in 1911, and you start saying how much compute could you buy back in the mechanical day where we had mechanical calculators, et cetera, and then you kind of go up to electromechanical, vacuum tubes, discrete transistors where I started, up into bipolar integrated circuits and CMOS integrated circuits. It's an amazing ride. What other industry has actually advanced that fast? I mean, if you just take this is the part of the cycle that you would kind of call Moore's Law. You've heard of Moore's Law? Everybody? Okay. So it's sort of the speed of things has doubled every 2 years, and the amount of compute you could fit into the same area, the same cost, has gone up by a factor of 4. If you'd been a car maker at this point and gone that fast, a $180,000 Rolls Royce would cost 32 cents and would go 186,000 miles an hour. So that hasn't happened. So this has been incredibly cool. And just to be able to have a front seat here was really because I had this good, this good grounding from CMU. One thing that I want to show you about, these are actual computers that were out there. A lot of them were my company, but not all of them. I mean, it was a big industry. It's a worldwide industry. So if you look at it, that looks like that is the kind of curve of Moore's law, but it actually goes back much further than Dr. Moore had said. But if you actually stare at it, there's kind of an interesting lesson in that. Because if you look at those things, it isn't nice and smooth. You know, if you kind of take your glasses off, it looks nice and smooth. But what it really is a bunch of discontinuities. It's nice, smooth, and then a huge discontinuity. And those discontinuities are where it's really, really interesting. Because what it really means is you can kind of go along, like I remember going from bipolar, as a matter of fact, when I came back from CMU, we were making the transition from one kind of computer, bipolar, to CMOS. And it's always very, very hard because what happens is what was working for you before all of a sudden stops. You know, you come into work every day and you say, if I make this thing 5% faster, I'll make a ton of money, you know, and it'll be all great. But eventually you get to something where you have to innovate differently. So you have these periods of continuous innovation and then these disruptions. And these disruptions are really hard. It's something that you have to like take a leap of faith. You have to think differently. And I think that's a really important lesson, and we're going to talk about that. And what I would also say that, you know, they're deep personal. These are where companies and careers are made or destroyed when this happens. I would just point out that where we are right now at the end, I don't know if you noticed, but I mean, back in the day when I was here at CMU, you knew how fast, oh, you know, I've got a 2 gigahertz, you know, Intel Pentium in my computer. Nobody cares how fast the computers are anymore. So the paradigm is changing. You know, many companies are getting out of the semiconductor business because as things move to something like cloud computing. And it's really interesting. I saw a very creative way of doing this. I just saw that Fujitsu, which has been one of our competitors for a long time, actually converted one of their semiconductor fabs into growing lettuce. Well, I just call that Moore's Law. So it's like, okay, boom, boom. Okay, I promise. Okay, you can all go now. All right. But it was really weird. So, you know, as I said, the company turned 100 years old in 2011. So it was a couple years ago. And they came in because I was the oldest and weirdest looking guy in my part of the country that worked for IBM. They said, okay, John, we want you to go out and tell everyone how great the company is. Now, do you love your job every day? Come on. I was not at a point where I really was like, really? But I do love my company. I love my industry. So I saluted, and I went back, and I looked at all of that data, and I really did get proud. I got proud of my company. I got more proud of my industry. I got proud of the universities. I got proud of everybody. And it was really interesting. I did a lot of thinking. I did a lot of thinking about that time of what had made us successful, what had made me successful to the extent that I was, et cetera. The one thing that was really interesting, though, is I had to do a lot of public speaking. And I live in a small state. Have you guys heard of Vermont? It's kind of near New Hampshire. No. So, you know, really, I was the only person to do these talks. And so they got the press in, and they wrote some papers out there. And it actually made it into the paper. 100 years of tech. Well, Vermont's the kind of place where you get to know famous people because there aren't enough people to go around, so the famous ones have to. And I ran into the governor a little bit after this thing out, and he looked at me and he goes, well, John, you don't look a day over 90. But it made me go, oh, okay. But actually, I was thinking about this, and there was a really interesting moment where I was really reflecting on my own life and my own career well before this, and it was a much scarier audience than this. I was invited to go to my kids' high school to be an honors, speaker. And if you're going to suck, here's okay. I never have to see you guys again. But to go to your local school and say, I was really worried about it because do you remember, you must remember, you were sitting there in high school and there was some old guy up there going, when I was your age. I was that guy. I was that guy. And I was like, well, God, what could I have said? What can I say? What do I wish that I could go back to my 1977 high school graduating self and say, listen, kid, just listen to me. And the thing that actually came to me, it was quite a surprise. It was actually kind of a shock. Oh, by the way, I should point out that these little things up there, because I'm on the topic, just watch those things up there a little bit. It came to me in kind of a weird moment. It actually, like most my good ideas, it came because Diane thought about it. She punched me in the shoulder and woke me up. what had really made my career, one of the things that had made my career very successful and made me love my job was really something interesting. It was play. Play. By the way, that is just a long piece of filament with 110 volts going through it. I'm very carefully not getting electrocuted by it. I'll tell you about that in just a second. So play. What do I mean by play? I mean, I'm an engineer. I'm a pretty senior engineer. I mean, isn't engineering about, totally being serious? I mean, you think about it. Engineering, when you teach it, it's about getting the right answer, isn't it? It's get the answer in the back of the book. It's serious. You play guitar. You play the field. You play cards, Larry. But do you play engineering? Well, the truth is, why do I think why is play so important to me? Because when I actually was doing all of that reflection, when I look back over 35 years of being in the industry, I found that the times I was most creative, most productive, most useful to my employer, most able to influence others were when I had a playful spirit. I don't mean I was goofing off, but when I actually brought a playful spirit into my life. And when I say that, I have to be a little bit more precise, because when I think about it, you have to say, what do I mean by play? I mean, play means a lot of things. It means different things to everybody, right? It can mean goofing off, it can mean fishing, it can mean bowling, and I do mean that kind of play as well. But that's not really what I meant from looking back. What I found is that there's several components about play that are really, really important from an engineering standpoint. Because when you think about a kid that's playing, what are you? You're timeless. You're not overly goal-oriented. You remember when I was talking about those periods of change where the old way of doing things breaks down and you have to think differently? Okay, if you just head in one direction, you sometimes can't see the next thing because it runs out of steam. You have to think differently. So when you're in that timeless, in-the-moment kind of thing, you watch a kid playing, they're completely blissed out. I find that when I'm in that mode, and it's an unconscious thing, it's a release, when I'm actually immersed in a problem so much that all of a sudden I realize the sun is rising, that I'm in a very, very good place. I also find that if you look at a kid, when you're playing, it's all about collaboration. You're not worried about, hey, this is my idea. You are sharing, you are borrowing from other people. You're even stealing from other people, taking ideas and putting them together. And I find that when you're in that playful place, people want to play with you. Like right now, I'm working in this Internet of Things and Smarter Planet kind of stuff. The fact that I like what I'm doing, I end up with a lot of people around me who want to help me. When you hate what you're doing, nobody wants to talk to you. So I think that there's this aspect of collaboration. And the other thing really involves taking risks. So one of the things that I have found, while I was in grad school, while I'm working for a large company, is that it's very easy to get so focused on an outcome, a performance, how fast does this computer have to be? What's my earnings per share going to be? What's my deadline? That you get so focused on one sort of thing that you can't afford to take a risk. You tell yourself, I can't take a risk, I might fail. And so if you can't fail, then you really can't succeed. Our founder once said, if you want to succeed, make twice as many mistakes. So the idea of being able to take risk and be a little bit bolder and kind of work and say, well, we'll figure it out, that's really a key part of being in the moment of play. This, my oldest son there, Max, is right there, but this is our youngest son, Gabe. Hi, Gabe. He knows that I sometimes, by the way, play can be really difficult. I stressed out about talking about play, which is, the irony is really deep because it's hard, right? Stressing about play. Gabe is my one of my spiritual leads. My kids all are. And he saw me, I was getting ready for a talk like this, and I was just all bundled up, and he said, Dad, come on, I got something for you. So we went down to the bridge near our house. It's, Max, what is it, 35 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet? Okay, so it's a 40-foot drop. And Gabe, said, Dad, you're going to jump off of this with me. And I was like, Now, I'm a cautious guy. I'm an engineer, right? But he really framed it that if I could actually commit to this thing, I would be able to get out of my own head and start thinking differently. And you know what? I took that picture of him, handed my phone to somebody, and sure enough, I did it. And I've done it many, many times since. And I'd like to say that, on the way down, it all became clear to me. It didn't. But it got me out of this sort of blocked-in thinking. As a matter of fact, all I was thinking is, don't die, But I tell you what, when I was halfway down, I was not thinking about, did I make a mistake? Should I go back up? So it's really an interesting thing about being able to commit. And so, it's really weird. It's the reason this is so important. This is not, maybe it sounds obvious, but it isn't, because in my experience, life has a way of squeezing play out. Tell me you don't feel that sometimes. You want to be playful and stuff, but work gets in the way. And especially as you get older and older and more senior, it gets harder and harder to remember what sounds like basic lessons, right? And so you just really got to play. And I've had several people, as I try to talk about this message, because it sounds almost frivolous, engineer talking about play. People will sometimes say to me, well, John, of course you can play because you're very senior in that company. And I think about it, and I really say, to the extent that I've been successful is not because, that's not the reason I get to play. I would argue that one of the reasons I have been successful is because I keep that playful spirit coming back. And even when it's the hardest, that's when you have to play the hardest. And I think that's the key message, and I'm going to try to illustrate that in a couple of different ways. So you sort of basically have to fight for your right to party, is what I'm saying. What's interesting, though, is you would think, okay, now how does that message actually play at work? Well, it's really interesting because, what's old is new. It turns out that my company, when you think about IBM, does play the first word that comes to your mind? Huh. Mine either, but it's really interesting. This smiling gentleman, this is our founder, T.J. Watson Sr., founded IBM through several incarnations of acquisitions in 1911. He's the man who said, all the world's problems could be solved if men could just learn to think. But you know what else he said? He said, if you aren't playing well, the game isn't as much fun. When that happens, I tell myself just to go out and play as I did when I was a kid. Well, as I said, the longer you go, the harder sometimes it gets to play. My company has been, like the industry, it's a tough place out there. Incredible transformations in IT industry and incredible financial pressures. But they've actually started to recognize that play is an important piece. And you know what's really interesting about it? I've been on this play piece since Diane, punched me in the shoulder before that talk at the high school. And that was probably 2012 or something like that. The company has been on a very similar kind of approach at trying to get internally and externally our folks to think about internal innovation in a more playful way. It's really, goes back to the founding of our company. And just kind of in parallel, they found me with this message. And they've started this kind of weird campaign. It's like on social media, about that playful spirit. And just 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, we had a bunch of photographers in there making videos about play, which has kind of been pretty fun. But this message, one of the things that I find is that when a message comes at you from all different places, you really need to pay attention. And like, we walked out of the elevator this morning to go on a run, and what is out there? Play. It is really appearing all the time, and I noticed that you just got to kind of pay attention to that. So I want to talk to you about, okay, so really play? How do I mean that that's really intersected into my job? So I'll give you a quick tour of my last 30 years at work, and this was really interesting because I really asked myself, well, what have I been doing? What did I do with that CMU education? Well, when I think about it, it was really about stuff that involved play very heavily. What I came from here was working on the little, the software that was used to make chips really, really fast, analog stuff. But as it got faster and faster, the stuff I learned here at CMU became more and more important to computing. And my first, couple of years back from grad school, I ended up working on video game processors. Now, IBM, we do a lot of chips that were just for our big computers. Those are really exciting. But, when you try to share that, I couldn't really talk to kids too much about it. But at one point, up until very recently, we were making the chips inside every video game processor, every kind. Whether you had, can I use brand names? Yeah, sure, what the hell. No, Nintendo Wii, Sony PlayStation, or Microsoft Xbox. It had an IBM chip in it, and I got to work on those. I was working on the specialized software used to design these chips. I hand burnished every transistor and every one of them, and I loved them all. And I learned a bunch of really great lessons. You know, some of these are incredible. These were the most powerful computers that were ever in people's homes. You know, much more powerful than your home computer or your laptop. And they were just so much fun. And it was so great to work on these cool chips that you could then go, when I'd spend so much time working with kids and trying to interest them in engineering careers, you know, I could tell them all I wanted about the, you know, algorithmic stuff that I would actually, you know, was working on at work. But it really didn't matter. I mean, you know, like I think about one of my favorite inventions from a playful standpoint was actually the technology used to do migration. As technology advanced in Moore's Law, how do we go from the first generation Xbox to the next generation to the next generation? That was actually a math error. I was trying to work out some algorithm, and I made a math error. And a friend of mine looked at that, and they said, well, that would actually work better than your original idea. And that was one of my favorite patents. Again, play. I was like, so being able to talk to kids about the insides of something, you know, you cannot find a young, and I'll talk about this in a second, you know, especially a young boy who doesn't play with these technologies, right? And the fact that we could go in and relate to them, it was very, very interesting, very engaging, very playful. You didn't have to worry about getting people signed up or hired to go work on game chips. Okay, as I got more senior, I started actually doing methodology, the complex tooling that actually put things together at a bigger scale. And I ended up being the circuit methodology lead. I ended up doing all of the tools, owning all of the tools for all of the circuit stuff that in our highest in field of computers. Well, that was really a fun job, and I loved it, and I loved all the algorithms and stuff. But what really made me proud is when I looked at this family of P-series computers, they bought 90 of them and stuck them together, and they made something called Watson. Do you remember Watson, 2011? Watson was an amazing idea. And again, what is it? It's all about play. And I'll tell you what, yesterday we just spent $1 billion on Watson, on a new Watson facility in New York City, Astor Place. And this is going to change the world. No, just trust me. And I don't even own that much stock. Doesn't matter. But what Watson did was a really interesting gamble. And it actually had roots in CMU too, now that I think about it. Watson was kind of in the spirit of, we had a thing called Deep Blue. And Deep Blue was a computer chess program that actually had roots in the CS department here. Nobody here is old enough to remember that, do they? Any chess players? Okay. But chess was one thing. Anybody who watches Jeopardy on TV, I mean, that's a diabolical. I mean, you have to look good like Alex Trebek, and you have to answer questions about anything. I mean, you would not believe the databases that went in there. And the story was that a bunch of senior IBM execs were at a bar trying to have a meeting back in, let's see, it was 2006. I don't remember. It was when Ken Jennings, when was Ken Jennings on? I think it was about then. And they were trying to get something done, and there was a TV back there, and everybody was watching, because Ken Jennings, for those of you who don't know, was the most winningest, Jeopardy player of all times. He was on, and they couldn't concentrate. They kept saying, and this very senior guy at IBM, very, very senior guy at IBM said, okay, we're going to go do that. From this bar, over his beer, he said, we're going to make a bet. We're going to use these P computers that I worked on. We're going to do an amazing job in creating the first cognitive elements of cognitive computing. We're going to put that together, and we're going to go challenge. And over these years, because I knew all of the people. I was on the hardware team, but there were so many different. There were thousands of people who were working on this. It was a really bold move. It turns out that our partner here, Sony Pictures, who owns the Jeopardy franchise, had every game of Jeopardy. The right answers, the wrong answers, and the timing, since back into the mid-'80s. And they actually knew what it would take, how fast you had to answer, how precise you had to answer, and how many you had to answer to win. This cloud was the sort of winner's cloud. If we knew if we were below that, we weren't going to win. And we had to be above that. I just want to point out something. Do you remember Ken Jennings? He's the red dots. He's from another planet. There is just no way that guy is from the same genetics pool that any of us are from. I just was amazed. But I remember up until, this was the progression as they would play this thing. And we got to donate questions and all that stuff. It was so much fun because we knew that we were going to play Jeopardy, but we didn't know whether we were going to win. It was a huge gamble. It was taking a risk, right? It was, and I remember right before, so it was around Valentine's Day, right around our 100th birthday, literally our 100th birthday. We were going to play, and I remember 2 weeks before, they added 4 more computers because it was just still iffy. And what they did is they sequestered the facility, they set up the thing, and they actually started, they ran this thing completely locked. And I'm very, very senior, and I'm also really nice. And I could not get a ticket to that. And so, and they swore everyone to secrecy. I mean, literally, they had to sign. And so it happened back in February, but it wasn't announced until actually our birthday, and no one squealed. We did not know whether we had won or we had lost. And it was just such an amazing moment when they released this. No one let out that we had actually won. But what an amazing, amazing, playful kind of thing. And it was really cool. We ended up donating our winnings from that to a charity. But what's really cool from a standpoint of me right now, is this technology is really being adopted in some amazing places. So since 2011, we've been adopting this to medical, legal, security, et cetera. And this technology is really, it is all that. It is that remarkable. It is not Skynet, or at least I hope not. No, it's not. It's not. It's not that at all. No. It's just deep question answering. It doesn't think. But the amount of data that it can handle and how it handles it, it's really remarkable how adaptable this is. And the interesting thing, in the spirit of play, the IBM owners of this just released a development kit to everybody inside IBM to go start playing around with it. How cool is that? It's totally playful. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is, what I'm working on now is I'm working on Smarter Planet, Internet of Things. And one of the interesting things about that is about big data. And big data is kind of an overused word, but if you kind of look at the progression, we're kind of maybe here, and the amount of data is going up not linearly, it's going up exponentially. And all the different sources. I'm very proud to say I'm contributing my share in the sensors and devices. Just the world is getting so instrumented. As a matter of fact, somewhere next year, supposedly, we're going to cross over. The amount of data is going to be equal to the number of stars in the known universe. That's pretty cool. But what's really interesting is how does it get to be this big? It gets this big because you're taking data from the real world and you're making sense of it. You're adding context. You're relating data. And so kind of going back to the Watson example, what we're actually doing is we're feeding all of this incredible information. Stuff like this, for example. Do you remember a couple of years ago, wait. Let's do that again. All right. Hello. Just a moment. This is very important. Do you remember the Harlem Shake? Wait for it. Who says we don't know how to have fun? Okay. Now, why would I show you something ridiculous, patently ridiculous like this? Well, because it turns out, okay. You know how it ends, right? During Jeopardy, I mean, obviously, this was before Jeopardy, but Watson regularly would take, transcriptions from YouTube, Lady Gaga lyrics, because, you never know, right? And during the height of the Harlem Shake kind of thing, there was a kind of a 3-week period where there was 2,497 hours of, 2,497 years worth of video that was collected. And it was terabytes a day did you see all the crazy knockoffs and copies? Okay, well, somebody had to interpret those. Somebody had to relate them. Somebody had to look at them for copyright violations. Data is really fun. And so the point of where I am right now is, the more stuff you can actually find out there, the bigger a playground it is. So that's what I'm kind of working on now. Now, okay, so I just talked about games. Okay, sure, play, the biggest game of them all. Data, which is really a playground. The other kind of thing that I really like is about the basic science that my company works on. And it's not just me that's being playful. When I look at all of my senior peers, they're doing that too. I have a couple of friends who are IBM Fellows. Actually, 2 of them won the Nobel Prize for doing this. But we developed a technique for moving atoms around. Now, it's atomic force microscopy. It's a standard lab technique now, but back 25 years ago it wasn't, or 20 years ago. This is a very cold plate of copper, and these are iron atoms. And they found out, I was down there 2 years ago, and they figured out that if you put these 12 iron atoms together, you could make a stable thing. It would be completely self-stable. And if you think about it, what you need to do to be able to store information, all that information, all those Harlem Shakes and Gangnam Styles and all the stuff that's going to come in the future, you're going to need lots of storage. So we figured out this is, at least to our knowledge, the most compact form of storage. Now what they supposedly did, the first thing they did is they wrote the company logo, the company slogan, think. I have it on pretty good account that they did something more scatological first, but you never know. But this is actually stable. And even while IBM is pushing the frontiers of science like this, my friend Don Eigler, who's since retired, he helped make a movie. Let's see if we can listen to this. Do you remember this, A Boy and His Atom? They used, these are atoms. This is the smallest movie. If you look in Guinness Book of World Records, that was the smallest movie ever made, right? And they used this millions and millions of dollars worth of equipment to do this because it was cool and people really loved it. What a great thing. Now, I'm about to shift gears on you, though. I was out there for a conference, and Don is a good friend of mine. I smuggled 2 6-packs of beer. This is being recorded? 2 6-packs of Diet Pepsi in the building. And Don and I did something really interesting. So we spent 3.5 hours drinking that beer, and I wrote our middle son, Sam's, name on this in 33 carbon monoxide molecules. So Max's younger brother, Sam, Gabe's older brother, Sam, 14 years old, 8 years ago, was hit by a car and died. And I know that's hard to hear, but one of the things that we've done to remember this really amazing kid who went on, he was an organ donor, he went on, his body went on to help save 4 other people, and our lives were changed forever. We have created this program called Samstones, which I'll tell you a little more about in a second, to remember him and to pass on the information about organ donation. And by the way, if you can sign that organ donation card or talk to your family about your wishes there, it would mean the world to us. But and as I'll say, it's sometimes when it becomes the hardest is when you have to play the hardest. And so letting me write my kid's name in 33 carbon monoxide molecules. This is the world's smallest memorial. It's a little, it's not something I would put in Guinness Book, but it has an element of play. It's kind of a weird way of thinking about it, which kind of brings me back. Do you remember this chart? This is how life technology has these kind of periods of linear, innovation, and then these discontinuities. Well, what I want to invite you to think about is think about our own lives, and it's not compute, but each one of us has a life flow like that, and with in God willing, it's going to always be up and to the right? And instead of being how much computing, it'll be fun or money or responsibility or, in my case, one over hair, whatever, right? But as life goes on, you're going to have that same thing. Things are going to be smooth for a while, then you're going to have some discontinuities, you're going to have to figure it out. And again, play is really important. My story is very different. I knew I wanted to go to MIT. Am I allowed to say that? Yeah. When I was 8, but moved to Vermont, lived in an old, cool, spooky house. IBM issued me a wife, which is really cool. Diane's dad, who really great mentor of mine who passed away last year. My father also passed away. Very much thinking about them today. But Diane worked at IBM, physics major for a while. Then, you know, how many kids to have? The company had nothing, no say in that. Then basically, you know, coming into CMU, that's sort of where we are there. Even getting, albeit a temporary tattoo of my company in a place I can't show you. And then, like I said, you know, sometimes real tragedy, things that you really can't handle, you know, that you have to reset. And then something that I'll talk to you about before. But I think what the idea is all of these transitions, again, sometimes things just change and you have to use a playful approach. I would argue it's playful because you have to take risks. You can't just keep focusing on the thing that's in front of you. You can't say, I want to be brilliant right now. You have to just kind of go with it and see where it goes. And that has been a very, very deep lesson. On the point about the sandstones, look, I mean, that was a very powerful lesson. You know, whatever I would like you to just think about this. You know, you also will all have this kind of flow in your life. And I just invite you to go away and think about that. You know, where are those transitions? How do I manage through those? When real tragedy hit our family, we had to figure out how to keep moving. You know, how do we move forward? It's hard. It's really hard. And we came up, I mean, it's play in a very strange way. I mentioned these stones. We started making these stones out of river rocks, and we had them etched by a friend. Our friend Chris etched those things with Sam's name, and we'd give them out. People really liked them. But it was a very complicated manufacturing process, and more people wanted them. So we ended up, a friend of ours is a potter, and she said, well, I can help. So she actually ended up starting to help us make these out of clay, and to this day, we still make them. I don't know, there's 50, 60,000 of these things out there now. And I decided, you know, people started telling me where they put them. So I taught myself PHP. This is a hell of a way to learn PHP. You know, I was a grieving dad, but it was been really fun and playful in a weird kind of way. People have sent these and made them out of atoms and chocolate and sent obscene ones and crazy ones and funny ones and found them where they found them. We have them in Antarctica. We have them in the North Pole. This one, this exact one, has been in space, 64 miles into space. A friend of mine sent it up on something called CubeSat, a small satellite, and it was, you know, it landed in the Atlantic Ocean, had a radio attached to it, and they went and fished it out. It's been an amazing experience. If you go to samstones.org, you can see a playful way of dealing with tragedy. And really, again, just how do you move forward? You move forward with play, because that's the only thing that we know how to go forward with. Now, what's been very interesting to me is, you know, after something like that happens in your life, you really have to think about, why are we here? So I've been working on that. And one of the things that I do love my profession. I do love technology. And one of the major things that interests me is, how do you get other people to love the technology? How do you get other people, how do we make new nerds and nerdettes, right? And this is a really interesting story. I'm sure you've heard about STEM careers and the crisis in STEM. And it really is interesting. I'm an optimist, but the data is a little scary. When you actually go look at the number of engineering degrees in the US, you know, I started around here, and, you know, what happened? Sputnik, right. I grew up in Houston. You know, I showed up at school and said, I want to be an astronaut. They said, you're not good looking enough to be an astronaut. You can be an electrical engineer. And like many of us, we all went in there, and then what happened? I don't know, a lot of other stuff started happening in the 90s. You know, internet boom, you know, boom bust, a lot of other reasons that people went into other things. And engineering careers kind of declined for almost 2 decades, about 15%. And I think the technical term for that is suckage. That sucks, you know? And I tell you what, if you look at this for women or minorities, or, you know, other underrepresented groups, it's terrible. The numbers are really, really bad. Now, I'm not here to say that everyone should be an engineer, but I do want to know what's up with this. And it's pretty interesting. A colleague of ours, Leah Jameson, who used to be the dean at Purdue, did an interesting study. She asked several thousand young adults what they knew about engineering. Why was this happening? And so she did a little thing. She said, okay, she would do a survey. She would say, okay, ask people, do engineers create economic growth? Okay, 69% said, yeah. Okay, that's pretty good. Go engineers. Okay, 56% said engineers would be a strong leader. 37% said that engineers care about the community. Well, that's a little weird. Okay. 28% said engineers are sensitive to societal concerns. 22, quality of life, protects the environment. The number one thing on kids' minds, actually, if you survey them about the concerns for the world, only 17% of people of these students thought engineers did that. Saves lives, 14%. It would be almost like kills puppies, right? What the heck? If you're sitting on an airplane next to somebody like that, what are you going to do? You're going to kind of like, you're going to get away from them. But Dr. Jameson did a really interesting thing. And where's Christine? I got to ask her something. She asked that same question about scientists. Oh, scientists. They improve the quality. They protect it. They save lives. Have you ever been in like an MRI machine that was made by a scientist? No. I mean, my advisor used to tell me, what is an engineer? A scientist with a job. So we got this kind of weird, thing going on is people don't know what we're doing. And it's like I said, the goal is not to make everybody an engineer or something like that. But it's almost like an artist. An artist doesn't paint because they want you to be a painter. A musician doesn't play because they want you to be a musician. It's just, I love it so much. I can't stand the fact that somebody doesn't like it. What's wrong with me if they don't like it? So I've been trying to think about this for a long time. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do this. And to be fair, I started this actually right when I went back from CMU. But since Sam's death, I really have been putting a lot of energy into it. Going out and doing education outreach, being out there with kids, and especially the weirder I look, the easier it gets, because I look like Dumbledore, it's like, or Doc or something. That's what they expect. But I always take, people who don't look like me. And I'm very pleased that my company has programs, and most companies, and CMU has a big part of doing outreach. And whatever you are, whether you're an engineer, a scientist, or a lawyer, or a poet, whatever you do, this kind of, it's not proselytizing, it's sharing what you love. And I gave up counting, but about in 2009, I estimated I worked hands-on with about 60,000 kids. And I know that's just a gross estimate. As a matter of fact, if my bosses ever found out how much time I still get in the car and schlep this old stuff out there and drive an hour to talk to 8 kids, I would get fired. But you're not going to tell them, right? But just in the point, can I ask Dana? So we started late. How much time do I have? How much time you want? Are you guys good for a little bit more? Okay. So just in the spirit of livening things up, I usually travel with lots of crazy equipment, but I decided to go easy. So I improvised. I think our AV guy we fabricated this at the beginning of the talk. This is 2 very unhappy forks. This is an extension cord, and this is a pickle from Permante's that Diane picked up on the way over. So this is the kind of thing that, it doesn't take much to be able to impress a kid. Now let's see what happens. What is your idea if we were to plug that in to this? What is your hypothesis? Any thoughts? Kind of a solemn moment for this. It might take a little. No, I would keep the lights off. Usually I good. Yeah, I think so. Is the switch on? Is the power on? Let's try getting out the intermediate. Just give it a second. Oh, I think I'm believing. I'm a believer. Now, I will tell you that sometimes you just have to be prepared to innovate like that. Can you see that? Wait. No problem. We can do. We'll do a multimedia, multi-level. This is if I Diane, you can give the rest of this talk if this goes badly, right? Here, I'll go into a dark corner. I was at a meeting. I probably shouldn't say with whom, but it was boring. It wasn't going well. they brought us our dinner. And I've been a vegetarian. Hang on to that, because that's a very important fact. I've been a vegetarian for a long time. I eat fish occasionally, but like last night. But they brought them these beautiful roast duck with all these great garnishes. They brought me roasted parsnips. And I was like, this just isn't going well. So, and his meeting was just boring. It was a dinner meeting. So I grabbed my laptop cord, knowing that I had another one, cut it off, took 2 of the forks, and I found out that a parsnip has a pleasing yellow light as well. And I tell you what, the rest of the meeting was a whole lot better. I'm not sure how to unplug this. All right, that's disgusting. All right, here, hold on. All right, so, no, wait. Well, you got to stay tuned for this play series that we're making, because we're going to have all sorts of crazy stuff like that in our Tumblr, IBM Blur page. But one of the things that's been really exciting, so going and driving to meet with kids is still my favorite thing, to actually do hands-on. That's been really important. But what's been really exciting, and it has been the magnification factor that comes from the Internet 2.0. How many of you heard of the maker movement? Oh, that's so great. Okay. So around 2003, there was a guy, Dale Doherty, a friend of mine, who came up with a magazine called Make Magazine. And my kids were all raised on this. It was sort of like back when I was a kid, people, kind of would make stuff in their garage. And if you had that particular hobby, it was like, doing model railroading or square dancing. It was something nobody talked about. It was like, But what happened is around mid-2000s, it started to be cool again. And Make Magazine came out, and at the same time, they put out a website that said, here's our ideas. What are your ideas? And would you, people started contributing. This is Sam, actually. This is Sam doing a photo light shoot. Max, you must be taking the picture, probably. But this is basically watching balloons pop. We saw that article in Make Magazine. But what would be cool is people would take this, and then they would kind of contribute their own. That actually went on to things like Instructables. There's Gabe. This is the first version of this hat band. What had happened is I travel a lot to Asia, and I saw these kind of early TVs on the side of buildings back in the sort of 2005, and I did the only thing natural. I said, that needs to be a hat. So I designed a hat. I actually came back, and I figured out about 90% of it. It was poor documentation in Chinese, and it was not designed for hat wear. So I figured out some of it, and I actually then published, not on one of these blogs, I said, hey, I can't figure out the rest. A guy in California who I'd never met, half my age, twice as smart, figured out the other 30%. We put some code out there. He changed it into another platform, the Arduino platform, and then eventually that was adopted by the entire community, so much so that the person who sells the most of this stuff ended up stealing my picture of my son and put it on her webpage. Isn't that wonderful? That's what it's all about. So the whole maker thing is about, what is it about? It's about collaboration. It's about sharing and taking risks, sharing credit, etc. The whole open movement is like that. The things like YouTube has been so successful in getting ideas out there. I mean, this was, I remember, I don't know, maybe at Max, it was your birthday, I don't remember. It was somebody's birthday. I was making ice cream with liquid nitrogen. Have you ever done that? I've done that in Ben Cohen's house, actually. But when you make ice cream with liquid nitrogen, it kind of saves all the grinding and salt. You just get some ice cream and you go, eat some chocolate milk and you go, and instantly it's ice cream. But I put that video up there. 3 days, I got 200,000 hits, and 1% of them wrote me nice letters saying, isn't that cool? That was about 2,000 emails. And 0.001% said that I was, Satan or the end of the world. What are you trying to do? But all of a sudden, it really convinced me that the power of this. And if you go out and you want to teach science, there is so much information out there on YouTube. Not all of it's right, so you have to become now more of a curator. But people are really contributing, so you no longer have to drive to a school to get them linked to science. Have any of you heard of FIRST Robotics? Yeah, I mean, it is such an amazing transformation where they've actually now get people in schools. We just brought it into Vermont, but it is worldwide. I remember Sam and I actually walked into a first robotics competition down at Cape Canaveral, and I was hooked. But it's basically taking robotic competition, which is, CMU has a huge, Red Whitaker and those guys have this huge legacy there, but taking it into the realm of competitive sports. All of our schools are starting to get these first teams, and if you notice, they aren't all guys. They aren't all guys. That other engineering school that I keep mentioning by accident, 60% of their applicants this year had first as a background. That's pretty amazing. And again, all of the information about this is shared and refined on the collaborative internet. The other thing is the maker movement has this idea. It's not just in the cloud. It's actually physically. And there's this whole movement of getting people physically together to share tools and to build things like makerspace. This was our makerspace called Generator in Burlington. I just learned last night that in front of Hammerschlag, one of the parts of the renovation, I think on the sea level, they're putting in one of these collaborative places where if you have an idea, you can go in there, you can get tooling, you can get material, and better than that, you can actually share help. It is, again, a remarkable expansion of our ability to share our playful ideas. Then there were these maker fairs. Does Pittsburgh have a maker fair? It does? How many of you know about it? How many of you don't know about it? Whoa, now you do. So next year. So this whole thing of, so many people have been building up on this idea of sharing those playful ideas. As a matter of fact, there was a Maker Manifesto. It was just published by O'Reilly Press. Tim O'Reilly has the company that makes all those software books. And one of the top ones is makers are playful. Makers are playful. But Maker Fair, we just had our Maker Fair in Vermont last weekend. This is me with one of those crazy hoops. Actually, it's somebody much better looking than me. It's a girl. But it has one of my light-up hula hoops that are made by that. But this year we had people building robotic sea monsters and making food with liquid nitrogen. It was just a wonderful thing. If you ever get a chance to do that, you will see play and engineering and science and art come together in a miraculous way. And it's not, if you're a software person, you don't have to feel left out. The whole open movement and open data, open government, open source has really made collaborative play around software engineering a reality. We came together a couple of, last year to actually, we had the museum, the Lake Champlain Museum wanted a way of reaching out beyond their walls to get kids to play more with our geography. And do you know the game Minecraft? So we took the topography. We have laser scans of the land and bathyscapic scans of the lake, and we created a version of Minecraft called Lakecraft, so kids can actually explore the entire geometry. And what they do, they'll go there and they'll look at all the geography, and then they'll start pouring hot lava on each other. And it's relatively safe. Actually, some kid actually created a little Minecraft icon of me. But the whole idea of this revolution of being able to take play and broadcast it out there and have other people comment on and magnify has been incredible. One of the other things that has been great is how much cooler it is now to be a nerd. And I just want to click quickly through a couple of things. How many of you have ever heard of Burning Man? Oh, that's better, but not a maker. Okay. Well, it turns out that the reason I know Ben Cohn, the ice cream guy, and we've got ice cream in the back, if you can last a couple of minutes, is that he invited me to go to Burning Man. And we decided to build we wanted some sort of scientific thing to carry hippies around on the desert. And if you want to share your passion, there's no better way to ferrying half-naked hippies. This turns them on to science for some reason. This is a simulation that my brother, Dr. Billy Cohn, actually created. This is one of the first incarnations. This is us driving into the sunrise after a long night of driving hippies around the beach. It was just such a great thing to be able to go there and kind of witness to science. And when out there on the Nevada desert, there are 50,000 people just like me exchanging ideas. Every year you see these things getting remixed in a very playful way, and with lots of explosions and burning and stuff. It's just fantastic. I would suggest that. Also, I found that using science and that playful spirit to engage kids has been really fun. This is a 20...
a computer microphone.
Well, you don't... Yeah. This is a 21-foot robotic pumpkin that is designed to scare kids that we did isn't that great? But I'll tell you what, this is a fundraiser for a thing called Haunted Forest. They just rebuilt it this year. It's been up there for a long time. There I am. But basically the idea of being able to build science, once you scare the person, then you can have a meaningful conversation with them about engineering careers. I just find it. But it turns out, anyway, you really have to, well, you can see a person down there. It's quite impressive. But really, being able to do science out in the wild, every town needs that kind of crazy science, mad science. I've had a lot of fun helping other people by, people who are artists, etc., trying to broadcast their vision, and they may or may not. You may have complementary skills to help somebody else get their message out there. This is actually Ben Cohn again, and he's very politically active, and he built this crazy device that essentially takes a dollar bill from your wallet, and it takes it on this crazy ride, and eventually it comes down here and it stamps on it it says this money is not for bribing politicians, and then it gives you your dollar back. Very successful. And I want you to know that because of doing that project for him is probably the reason that you're getting ice cream today. So you never really know what the results of your scientific act, your act of good science. Or do you know the band Fish? Anybody know the band Fish? Okay. Band Fish, it turns out that Mike Gordon, the bass player for band Fish, is a good friend of mine. As a matter of fact, last night he told me he applied to CMU, which I think means he didn't get in here, but he wants to come back and study op amps. He wanted to entertain hippies, and he asked us to build, again, all of these are projects that I do with students for people to get them excited. We never take money for it. None of our group does that. And we borrow mercilessly from other people and put our ideas back out. This is a kind of a weird keyboard used for, it's a 30-foot keyboard, like the one in the movie Big. Do you remember the movie Big? And again, when you are actually looking at those hippies and how happy they are, again, it's a great time for a conversation about science and engineering careers. No, seriously. I love that. All right. Okay. Finally, there's a kind of interesting thing. Yeah, well, what does that have to do with play at work? Well, it's really funny how this has come full circle, because I do really bring this playful spirit in. I mentioned that right now, as we move into this Internet of Things, my new area, it's so exciting to get people around the idea. We just yesterday, day before yesterday, we had a kickoff for, do you know what a hackathon is? You ever heard of that? We have an internal hackathon of people who wanted to, who want to actually work with their hands, write some code, make some cool stuff. Okay, so the people, my friends who work in this area, they're all very well-established grown-ups, said, who would want to do that? We had over 1,000 people sign up. We ended up having to get extra phone lines, and they're out there hacking on stuff. Well, it turns out one of the best examples I have is a project that several of us, my friend John and Colin, and my son Max and I worked on. And this is it's called Flourish, and it's basically the floor of a small museum in the city of Burlington. It's the city museum for the city of Burlington. They had these glass bricks in there, and they were just getting dirty and grimy. They were for bringing light into the basement. Well, anything that is clear needs lights behind it, in my opinion. And so we basically put a couple of thousand lights back there, and kind of it's a coarse array of them. But basically, what it allows you to do is there are 2 Kinect cameras. This is all using open source stuff that I borrowed. Max made this movie just by coincidence for me the other day. He didn't know I was going to use it, but thank you, Max. But when people walk on it, it tracks their movement. If you want, you can turn it into a Pong game, and people can kick things back and forth. And because I can spy on it from anywhere in the world, I see people using it all the time. You can actuate it from when you're walking by. You come out of a bar at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can go play with that. That's science. That's pretty cool. As a matter of fact, it even phones me when it stops working. And a month and a half ago, Diane and I were in Peru, about ready to go up to Machu Picchu, and the thing phoned me to say, please restart me, which I thought was pretty good. Turns out that this has been my best example in that internal hackathon, because it's using IBM, something we call Bluemix, bluemix.net, which is a platform as a service, a cloud hosting thing. It uses some of our Internet of Things. It basically is taking my work into my play and bringing it back into my work. And it's been so much fun because people love being passionate about stuff. You can see, actually, there's a little app that you can go to the website, you can write on it with that little app. You can bring it up on your phone and write on it. And anyway, it's been super fun. This is the app that actually called me when we were in Machu Picchu. All right, now, so that's what I'm trying to say, is that you can be playful, again, because it's good for yourself. It's good for your company because you're going to be more creative, and it's good for the next generation. Now, the one thing I would say is I was trying to figure out, and I'm almost done, I promise, trying to figure out, okay, well, I still love doing one-on-one stuff with kids, and I do that with a lot of my friends. We go out and we teach, share our geekiness with kids, do the pickle kind of stuff. I found that using the internet was another way of actually broadcasting what we were doing around play and getting other people's ideas. But I still was trying to figure out how could I get my geekiness and my passion out to more people. And so it was quite a few years, several years ago, I was sitting there, it was December, and I went to Diane and I said, honey, how do I get my nerdiness out there? How do I broadcast it more? And she looked at me lovingly and she said, I'm cooking. Go ask the cosmos. So I said, okay. So I had a beer, or probably a glass of wine at that time. So I walked outside, and it was snowing, I remember that. And I said, I really did. I said, okay, cosmos, what do you have for me? What can I do? Nothing. No voice. But, seriously, the next day, out of the blue, I got a call from a woman who said, hey, do you want to be on reality TV show? And I was like, and be a scientist? And I heard scientist, I heard TV, and I went, of course. I was thinking of Mr. Science, like, okay, children, we're going to. So, long story that kind of ensued. I ended up being asked to try out for this thing, and the only way I ever found out that they'd found me is because I look weird. I have bad hair. So, okay, I'll do it. So I actually sent them a demo tape, and they lost it. So I said, well, that's not it. They said, no, send another one. So I sent another demo tape of why I was passionate and what I was doing around science, et cetera. And they said, we'd like to talk to you. So they made an arrangement. I was supposed to fly from Vermont down to LA, and I was supposed to interview with them and try to figure out what could I do, whether I could be on this show. And it was the weirdest thing because, I flew out there and I was wearing, I was probably wearing a sports jacket, and I was going to meet the guy at the front and shake his hand. They jumped out of a van, they put a blindfold on me and pushed me in the back of a truck, and I was like, anyway, we had 3 days of just kind of hacking around, and they would give us these physical tests, and they would ask us stuff. They would ask us to take things apart, put them together. A guy blew up a battery right behind me. That was pretty weird. But I remember they gave us a test, the Minnesota multiphasic, and it had all these. I thought it was to make sure that you were sane enough to be on TV, but it was like aliens control my thoughts. True or false? You laugh, but that's hard, right? Because if they did control your thoughts, they would tell you they didn't. And I was just like, okay, I'm overthinking it. And finally, I remember the psychologist. He was going over this thing, and he goes, are you sure you want to be on reality TV? And I was like, oh, man, I must be a mess. He later told me, Dr. Cork, he told me, no, you were much too normal. But anyway, so I went back. I said, that was pretty interesting. That was that must have been in December, January, something like that. And I didn't hear anything for about 6 weeks. And I actually wanted to get the copy of that test because I wanted to show it to somebody. And besides, I had a new angle on the alien thought. So I called, and they said, no, you can't have it. You're on the show. And I went, I'm not on the show. They said, it says here you are. I got a call later that day. Basically, the guy said, you're on the show. You got to be out here in 2 weeks. You can't tell anybody where you're going. And we'll see you then. And I was like, might be a good time to talk to my boss. And I tell you, I agonized over this. I drove my family crazy. Should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? And, you know, in the end, I remember the second in command of my company, of IBM, he had heard about this. And he called me and he goes, John, we both know you're going to do it. So I was going, okay. But I tell you, the conversation with my boss was like a reality TV show. It was like, beep, you're going to what? Your career? Well, anyway, long story short, I kissed my family, kissed my wife, kissed my dogs, not on the mouth, and, you know, got in there, same story, got off the plane, you know, blindfold around us. They stuck us in the van. They locked us in a hotel room, or you know, they took away our keys so we could get out. We couldn't get back in. But we sat there for, you know, 5 days, and they made us read every, you know, post-apocalyptic novel. We had to watch every zombie movie, every post-apocalyptic. Ask me something about Mad Max. Just try. You know. But we had to do that. And then one day they woke us up. They stopped feeding us. They kept us awake for 36 hours. And then they took us in a van to an abandoned mall, and they said, oh, they strapped on one of these microphones, and then they said, go. Like, what? Just go. And they said, you know, just go over there. They didn't want to talk to us. So we were just kind of walking around, and we kind of wandered into this old mall, and there was stuff there. There was like a couple cans of food. There was old sheets and stuff like that. We started picking things up. And then real people started coming in with real baseball bats and really hitting us. I did notice they never hit us in the head. The only rule was they couldn't kill us and they couldn't hit us in the face. Anything else was good. But the good thing is, same with us. We could hit them anywhere. We could do anything we wanted, but we couldn't kill them and we couldn't hit them in the face. That was the only rule. So it was pretty easy. But they basically chased us out, and they ran us down to the river, and then they said, you know, they just pointed and they said, go. And I thought, okay, we're going to walk down the street, and, you know, there's going to be Gilligan's Island. We ended up walking. It was 95 degrees. We walked for about 5 hours, and we finally found this. So here's what happened. So basically, we were told not to speculate too much, but something bad had happened, and almost everyone was dead. We weren't, and, you know, you are here, too bad, and this is what happened.
We're on the edge of a global catastrophic disaster. Human conflict, nuclear bombs, natural disasters, chemical and biological warfare. Without warning, the world as we know it can come to an end.
It's the near future. A viral outbreak decimates the world's population. Your home, your workplace, your friends and family, gone. Los Angeles is one of many cities left devastated. Infrastructure breaks down. Chaos reigns. This is the setting of The Colony. The Colony is a controlled experiment to see if 10 strangers can rebuild society in the wake of a global catastrophe. These 10 volunteers represent a cross-section of modern society.
We had marine biologists. Very important to have a marine biologist if you're locked in a warehouse. She was great, actually.
And no communication with the outside world. All they'll have to work with are their skills, the tools and supplies inside an abandoned factory, and whatever they can scavenge at a handful of cordoned-off locations. As part of the experiment,
That's me at the other end of that rope. Me and Dice.
challenge the colonists' resources and security. The world of the colony has been designed using...
So, sort of a lot like my work, actually. But now, I was so unprepared. I was like, oh my God, what is this going to be like? You know, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. But by the end of this 59 days, they couldn't drag me out of there. I loved it so much. And just kind of a spoiler alert, because I don't think I'm going to mention this, is 2 weeks from the end, one day they said, hey, John Cohn. I didn't even know how they knew my last name. Your wife is here. And I was like, what? So I ran outside, and there, down there with a bunch of actors was Diane. So she was on the show for 2 weeks as well. And it was an amazing experience. Just, I mean, if you want to get to know 9 strangers, 3 toothbrushes, that's a really interesting meeting thing. Or 10 of us, 2 beds. And the reason they have two beds is because if you ever watch, this was sort of like MacGyver meets Survivor meets Big Brother, because they had cameras on us 24 hours a day. So if you were going to snore, they wanted to catch it. So we all had to be in there. And this is a really good team bonding experience, to start sleeping together the day after you've met your friends. But that sounded terrible. But we had all sorts of challenges. Water. You know how long you can go without food? 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. You know how long you can go without water? 3 days. And I'll tell you what, day 2 is not even very fun. And it was really bad. And the only source of water we had was the LA River, which was about 800 meters away, that we could get to once a week. And it was blue and green, black, stinky water. Food, on the other hand, was not so much an issue in that we had lots of cans of food. They were graciously hoarded for us before, but most of them didn't have label. We had lots of cat food, lots of dog food. In a pinch, go for the cat food. Just telling. We had hominy grits. We had sauerkraut. What else did we have? We had all sorts of crazy stuff. But eventually, we ended up needing more protein, and so we started improvising. Now, there were rats all over the place, but there were the unfriendly rats that were natives, and then they brought in these cute white rats from the pet store. We were only supposed to eat the white rats. Well, I had been a vegetarian at that point. I was a vegetarian since 1976. My first red meat was rat a la basil. That is my friend Vlad. And it was delicious. We had pigeon, we had rats. We managed to find a goat. I mean, the show itself was really goofy. But, you know, it taught me to take some chances. My yuck factor is now very, very high. Very, very high. But you know what? I got to say that grad school is a great prep for that. You know, like, go look in the pantry of any of your grad students. But it was a discovery. It wasn't on Fox. And so it was really all about innovating under duress. First of all, we had to go after these problems in the right order. So water was a big deal. We had to make a water filter, and that was using sand, and we made charcoal. We actually burnt wood in, you know, airtight kind of things. And the sand took out the big particles, and the charcoal took out some of the smell. And then what did you have to do with it? Boil it. You had to boil it, and then we would put it in these big containers. So that's how we did our water. That was a big septic tank. We had to figure out some way of making electricity because it was discovery, and they wanted us to weld. And we were lucky to find a wire feed welder, but we had car batteries. We had lots of car parts. We had a bunch of broken cars. And if the zombies really come, hoard old cars. It's better than Home Depot, let me tell you. But we had to figure out what we didn't have was gasoline. So Michael, everything was about collaborating, but we had this, Michael was really good at physically fabricating things. It was interesting because he and I were supposed to fight all the time, but we ended up liking each other, and they hated that. But he was a great physical builder, and I liked doing the kind of sciencey stuff. And what I had learned is that when I was an exchange student in Austria in college, after too many schnapps in a language that I hardly knew, this old lady, my landlady's mother, was telling me how they had retrofit their cars to run on wood. Have you ever heard about that? When they run on wood, internal combustion? So we built a wood gasifier. And the interesting thing about that, so you put wood chips, wood pieces in a small container, and you heat it with a wood fire with just very little air. And then the vapor that comes out has carbon monoxide, which is, you don't think about it as being flammable, but it's flammable, hydrogen, and methanol, and a bunch of tar. And if you let it cool, you can actually run a car engine, you know, a motor. We took a little gasoline motor from a pressure washer, and we took the alternator out of a car, which was designed to charge 12-volt batteries. Michael fashioned those together. I did this, Vlad and I and Morgan, some of my peers, made this assemblage to try to make the wood gas. And it was really interesting. What I liked about the show, it was about inventing, but it showed failure, too, because I had this first construction where I had the wood chips too far out of the fire, and it didn't get hot enough. And then Vlad had the idea of moving the thing back in, and that eventually worked. And it was amazing. So we were able to start it on a little bit of gasoline, and from then on we were able to generate our electricity using wood fuel. It was complicated. You could run it for a couple of hours, and you had to take the thing apart and clean it out. So they got tired of that. So they came to me and they said, "Professor," they called me professor, "nobody wants to see you cut any more wood or see any of you guys cut any more wood. you know, we want you to make electricity some other way. And I was like, it really felt like Gilligan's Island. Like, what, a nuclear reactor? What do you want? They said, no, be creative. How about, they wouldn't tell you what to do, but they would make suggestions. They said, solar, perhaps. I was like, what? I said, who's going to believe that? They took me on the roof, and they showed me, Joey, a couple of us, you know, every 10th building had solar cells. And they let Joey pick one of the buildings, and they somehow managed to go and allow him to break in and take some of these things, which was pretty cool. So we built, again, we all collaborated. Joey made the wooden frames. Michael made this cool pivoting thing out of fencing. And Morgan and I made a little tracking device. We used a gear motor from a winch to be able to, so as it turned, it would move the things back and forth like this. And then we used parts from a car, to, basically a power relay and some amplifying electronics. And then we used the little thing from a nightlight we found that turns the light on when the light, you know, turns the nightlight on when you turn the light off. And basically it would follow the sun, and when the sun moved, it would go, eh. And if a cloud came in there, it would go, until it found it again. But it eventually worked, and this is how we generate our power. And it was really fun because this became, I work on this kind of stuff at work now. Not the mechanicals, but the software part of it. And so that was really cool. And it was really fun. I even made a radio. They decided we needed to communicate. There were people out there, and it's been a long passion of mine. I love making Tesla coils, but I even made a little radio set that used spark gaps, a lot like what would be on the Titanic. I used aluminum foil and glass to make a capacitor. My friend Johnny V and I made the transformer to actually couple, and we knew that it worked because every time we turned it on, the people the cameramen that have their earphones would go, ah. Anyway, the whole thing was about, let me just flip here. The whole thing was about building and doing adventures. And one of the favorite things that we did is we had these bad guys, and our job was to not kill them, but to kind of confuse them and, you know, and keep them away. And I found that my CMU degree made it very easy to design things like flamethrowers. So great use of it. So we learned how to do innovation under constraint, et cetera. It was a really good experience. But the one lesson that it really taught me is not to worry so much. I was so worried about this whole thing, and I was worried about how is this going to come across, et cetera. But I remember the first 3 days, we were terrible. We were so stinky. It was ugly. We'd been sleeping in the same wet clothes, et cetera. But it turned out that the day 3, it rained. The only real time it rained. So we ran outside. My colleagues ran out the front door to capture every raindrop. I, being the selfish guy, I ran out the back, threw my clothes off, and just tried to get clean. And I turned around, and there was a guy with a $100,000 camera looking at me. I said, dude, you wouldn't. He said, I'd pick up that sheet. Well, I didn't even think about it. 59 days. This was day 3 of 59 days. I didn't even think about it. So anyway, I went home. We lived through the whole thing. It was a really great experience. Then I went back to work. And I hadn't seen the show, and it wasn't going to be on until August. Well, I got a call from the head of marketing for IBM, very senior guy, and he invited me to come down to headquarters. I was like, okay. So I drove down in my little Prius, supposed to meet with him for 20 minutes, and like everything I do, it takes too long. Sat there for an hour and a half talking to him about the show. He was really excited about it, but I was nervous about it, so I ended up driving back, and I called one of my friends who was in the meeting. I said, how'd that go? They're going to love it. They really like the fact that an IBMer is out there in this prominent way. I was thinking about the language because there's a lot of beep, beep. He said, don't worry about it as long as you kept your clothes on. So I'm in a room. Diane and I are in a room. The show is starting. The last 45 seconds. This is after I picked up the sheet. So I was pixelated. But I was like, oh, my God. My dogs are seeing this. My folks are seeing this. My family. That big boss guy is seeing it. And you know what? And I was thinking, this is it. This is the end of my career. All he said to me was, dude, you should get more sun. So my point is, we get so tied up, back to the playful thing, we get so fearful about what could happen that we don't hold back, that we stop and we don't go forward. And so I guess I would leave you with that thought. don't be afraid. Be out there, be playful. Whatever you do, it can't be that bad. My career's only gotten better since then. So what I would just say in closing is just whatever your passion is, hold that. Don't ever let it go. And when it starts to drift off, pull it back. Share it with other people. Help other people with that passion. And let that be your guide in good times and in bad. So thank you very, very much. And I really appreciate it.